Welcome to Recombination Nation. Today I have Nick Mallonee. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Oh,
It's Mallonee. Yeah, but
Mallonee. It
it's
sounds
as good
French.
as I expect anyone to do. It's pretty good.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
So Nick reached out to me to be a guest on the show, and when I saw the list of what he is growing and breeding, I'm like, yes, instantly. He is in Northern California working with a whole range of tree crops that don't get a lot of love typically in the crop breeding community. So we'll be talking about avocados and golden Chinquapins and Carob and a few other things as well. So that's about as much as I know. I'm really keen to learn more. So I'll throw over to Nick, and he can tell me a bit more about his journey through life and what got him into growing and breeding all of these really unusual plants.
Right on. Well, thank you for that, Shane. Yeah, I'm honored to speak with you. I'm quite a fan of your work. So, yeah, nerds unite. Let's get into this plant stuff, I guess. Yeah, I think I've kind of always had a thing for plants. I had a book in the house when I was growing up that was just about edible plants of California, and would pick that up and go wander around the yard and just eat stuff. And then my parents realized they could leverage this into me making salads for them. So and they were eating stuff they never eaten, like purslane or plantain, stuff like that. And yeah, that was probably where I kind of got into it. And it took a while for me to figure out that there's a community of people that also likes to grow plants without lots of industrial inputs and pesticides and things like this, because whenever I got like, a gardening book or something like that, and they'd just be like, add Miracle Grow, and I'm like, it's not a great idea. I don't think long term, but yeah, then at some point kind of discovered that there's this permaculture community, and they've got a lot of work into this already. So that's kind of, I think, accelerated some of my learning, just learning from experiments and mistakes that others have made. So, um, yeah, I know you mentioned we'll talk a bit about doing low input stuff, but that's one of my favorite aspects of growing plants is like what plant can use my pee the best, and these soldier fly poop or whatever, figuring out how to cycle all that stuff in. Um, yeah, and these days, I think with oh gosh, man, I think I came across limits to growth in college, and that kind of planted a seed that I've vacillated back and forth between kind of perseverating on, our the finiteness of the resources that kind of prop up our modern existence, with like trying to just be in the moment and enjoy it while it lasts. It's you can get kind of sucked into this. There's a whole world of like collapse, doom kind of stuff around that. But I think, and this goes to what it speaks to what I appreciate about your work is that you kind of found a way to make something positive of that, and it comes back to being grateful for what we've got and trying to make use of that gift to give something valuable to the future, and future generations and other species. So yeah, I think with 2020, pandemic coming on, that brought a lot of things to the fore, and I was kind of hopeful, like, okay, this is it, like, let's go, this is our time. All the people that weren't ready to, talk about growing food, like maybe it's the time to tap into that, and there was that energy, right? I mean, we were running out of stupid things like toilet paper, but I think people are just not used to ever seeing a bare shelf in the store. So, um, yeah, at that time, as like a lot of people, I think I probably spent a lot of time online. I was at home for a while. Um, I came across a group that was doing some really cool stuff. Might be a good guy for you to talk to if you can catch him. Jordan Fink. He's organizing people around growing chestnut trees. And just trying to get them planted out in the community, basically with the idea that like this could replace grain agriculture to some degree, right? Like you could put these in parks and cities, and this could be kind of like a cultural event where people are getting together and um, harvesting, processing these things together, and enjoying the fruits of their labor. And I think I fully subscribe to all that. Like, yes, we could be doing a lot more together. I think using food and growing food and cooking and processing things together could be a pathway to kind of heal the disconnect that exists not just between people and each other, our neighbors, but also people in their environment. We're just kind of, again, it's like the fossil fuel connections kind of severed that. The abundant energy, has made it less important for us to be connected to those cycles. But I think we've evolved to be connected to them. And one way or another, we're going to have to kind of get back on those same cycles and paying attention to the seasons and the weather and helping each other grow things and eat. So yeah, just interested in getting a head start on all that. And to that end, I've been growing lots of fruit and nut trees. And I think in the back of my mind too, expecting the housing market was going to collapse any day now for the last 5 years, and I might be able to afford some land more than I've got now to grow a lot of this stuff. But just start growing a lot of stuff and giving stuff away, and more recently selling some plants too. But I found that to be a really good way to connect with others and build some community that way as well. So yeah, like you, it seems like there's a lot of shared interests in these different things. So I also find plants just a great thing to nerd out about, and it seems endless. Like you can learn so much about even one species and meet somebody else who's like, "Oh, did you know this?" And you're like, "No, I did not." Um,
That happens to be
it's really
regularly
fun.
interviewing people for
Yeah,
this show. I'm regularly stumbling to things like I thought I pretty much had it under wraps. I'm like, nope, there's so much more out there to learn,
a bit
even
more
after a
there. Yeah,
lifetime of being fascinated by this stuff. So
yeah,
we should probably get into talking about specifics. Because yeah, you're working on a bunch of really interesting tree crops, which I think they're really interesting because most of them are familiar to people, but very few people are actually growing and breeding them in any serious way. And I think probably the darling, the place to begin is avocado. So
yeah.
tell me about the work that you are doing with avocado.
Well, to say that I'm breeding them in a serious way, may be a stretch. I'm at a level where I've collected a lot of different avocados, and I'm probably just gonna be dropping names of random people you should talk to. There's a guy in Seattle that's actually he's killing them by the thousands, trying to find one that'll grow in the cold up there.
Ah,
But I can connect you with his work as well.
absolutely.
Um, yeah, he's a cool guy. We've exchanged some genetic material over the years too. I think before we realized that wasn't legal for him to send me anything, but yeah, he's doing some cool stuff, and I think I'm in a unique location for avocado because we're further north than it's typically grown commercially. Like people don't really know that you can grow avocados here, despite the fact that there's 50, 60-year-old trees all over the city that I live in. So yeah, I spend quite a bit of time, just riding my bike around. I'll knock on people's doors when I see a nice avocado. I'll ask them if they know anything about it. Is it grafted? Is it a seed? And try to suss some of that out. And there's loads of really cool trees here. Some of them are very productive. Some of them make really nice fruit. Sad things too, like man, tree I would have loved to graft. This woman was selling some avocados on the side of the road, and my wife was driving by, and she was like, my husband would appreciate this. Bought a couple avocados, brought them back. I was like, oh my God, these are so good. And like, I went back there, and I saw where the tree was, but I couldn't find the woman. Uh, and I came back again a few weeks later, and the tree had been cut down. It's like,
Oh,
and I talked to some of the folks that live there, and I was like, yeah, I'd love to like graft that and propagate it if it shoots back up from the root, but the last time I went by, it was like pickup trucks parked on the stump, and there was like no chance for anything to come up there. Um, but yeah, I think finding stuff that'll do well in the cold here is exciting to me, and also looking for stuff that are valuable for rootstock, because there's some trees that just are super tough and don't seem to need much in the way of irrigation or other inputs. And typically, I mean, like in Southern California, they require almost as much water as a lawn does. So finding ways to grow those with less is also of interest to me. So kind of experimenting with heavy mulching on my trees here once they get established. But I'm also aware of trees that the avocado trees, there's one just growing in a field, it's not irrigated. It's just hanging out there. And I haven't seen that one fruit, but um, yeah, I'm trying to get my hands on all that material and hopefully be growing out seeds and passing those out in the future. And that it's another thing where everybody wants a grafted tree. Nobody wants to grow a seedling out. Um, and there are some avocados that are propagated clonally. They produce from a really young age. But I think like with Burbank's experiments with chestnuts, like if you could find a balance where you got something that'll pop one or two fruit out within 4 or 5 years from a seed, people might get into that, especially if it didn't require much more than just popping the seed in the ground and maybe mulching it. So yeah,
Well,
just there's other avocado nerds around. I've enjoyed collecting stuff with them and sharing stuff. And um, there's a couple in a few hours south of me, super nice folks, Ellen and Freddie. They've got a avocado nursery, and they also are kind of doing a similar. They're like way ahead of me. Their trees are much older, and they've got quite a nice place where they're at collecting different avocados. And they might be a cool one to talk to at some point too. I know Freddie's done some apple breeding stuff. He was showing me about some of that the last time I was down there, but they're super knowledgeable about avocados. But getting to the breeding part of them, it's crazy because I don't know that any avocado that exists as a cultivar has been intentionally bred. Like I don't think anything's been hand pollinated. I think with one exception, which is an avocado called Carmen Hass, which is like it's getting a visit by a soldier fly. Sorry. That's a that was like a bud mutation from a Hass tree that flowers more regularly. It can flower 3 or 4 times a year.
mhm,
Pretty much everything else is just like a chance seedling. So
mhm.
the reason that is because avocados, mature tree can make over 1 million flowers, and of those, maybe a few hundred turn into fruit. So hand pollinating, yeah, that's just intimidating. I mean, I get intimidated just thinking about that. But I think establishing orchards where things can cross pollinate freely, and maybe keeping some bees on hand to help with that could
I
be a way
thought
to
they were
kind
fly
of
pollinated.
yeah, yeah. Well, around here, people will put a bee hive in their orchard, and they'll get pollination from that.
Mhm.
Um, I think carpenter bees too. I remember learning they do a good job of pollinating them. But I get carpenter bees in the prunings from my mulberry tree, so I just throw those under. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe in their native habitat, they're fly pollinated.
Mhm.
You could be right about that. I think I only really know about what pollinates them here, and I know they're not a favorite of honeybees because there's just not as much nectar in them. So having a hive around is a way to kind of yeah help with that process. But um,
Now, I'm also
it's
curious about the genetic diversity in avocado because I've read bits and pieces about how incredibly varied they are in South and Central America. But then,
yeah.
as like locations far away from that homeland, you tend to only get like little bits and pieces of the like Australia has very little avocado genetics available to people. How does Northern California kind of connect? Has there been a longer history of
I think
introductions?
yeah, I would say, I mean, with the trees that I like the old trees that I work with, a lot of them, again, I think it's probably a time before there's restrictions on this stuff, but there's a large agricultural community here. Our agriculture, by the dollar is almost exclusively wine grapes here. There's other stuff that we produce on a commercial scale, like apples, but the value of wine grapes so far exceeds that of apples that people have ripped out their apple orchards to plant grapes for wine, and so there's always been also a need for migrant labor, and a lot of those folks come from different parts of Mexico, Central America, and retain connections. Like a lot of people, they'll go back and forth driving to and from visiting their family, and they'll just come back with seeds and plant them here and just see what goes. And so I think there's the three main races of avocados, right? There's like the West Indies type, and I don't have as much experience with that one because it seems to prefer a more humid and sort of tropical climate. But as far as I know, they all hybridize very readily. So the races that do better, like in Southern California, it's mostly Guatemalan race, like the Hass avocado, and um, there's another one called Reed. It's this big round avocados. Those are like Guatemalan type, but then there's Mexican type, which tend to have a thinner skin and like an anise scent to the leaves. And um, I think most of the ones that I find here are hybrids of Mexican and Guatemalan to some extent. And so the ones that are more recent, I assume are mostly going to be seedlings of Hass because that's still the nearly the only variety you can find at a store. Once in a while, you'll see Bacon, Zutano, Mexicola, Reed, Gem at a store, but that's like a very short period every year. Um, yeah, so it'd be interesting to see if there's genetics from that West Indies family that could survive here, because that could be a fascinating contribution to that material. But I don't know too many people that are growing them. One of my friends recently pruned one of his, and he asked if I wanted some cuttings from it. And it's one called Day. Um, so I grafted some of those up. I'll see if they survive. He's got it like in a greenhouse kind of setting, I think. So I don't know how to do outside, but yeah, as far as I can tell, they're coming from all over. And it's interesting because, like, there's a community garden nearby, and the guy who runs that is a super cool guy, but he kind of keeps track on where everyone's coming from with their plots. And so there's people from all over Mexico that grow food there. Um, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Africa and the Caribbean. And so there's a lot of diversity in everything that grows there, and there are avocado trees there. Most of them are pretty young, but I've been talking with him about top working some of those because some of them are older and haven't really produced much yet. So that seems the best way to graft a mature avocado or an in-ground avocado, and I think probably the best way to establish an avocado orchard or tree if you wanted to is just direct seeding and then let them grow out for a few years, maybe thinning to your favorite ones that grow the best, and then top working those, which is I have a very high success rate with, which is cool.
Interesting. I might need to follow you in that path in the future because I find it very difficult to establish transplanted avocados. I think a lot of people in
Their
Australia
roots,
do.
yeah,
Yeah,
the
whereas
roots are real sensitive.
if you direct sow seeds, you're much more likely to find the part of the landscape where they actually want to grow.
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. And if you got access, I mean, if you can get enough seeds, it
Yeah,
can make that a lot less painful.
yeah,
You're not wasting anything.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about the next species that really like made a big flashing light when you mentioned it. So you're doing some work with carob, and
Yeah.
most people have tried carob at some point in their life. How much they enjoyed it might depend on how it was processed and presented, but
Yes.
it's an extremely useful crop. And
Yeah.
historically, it has been way more significant than it is today. And yeah, you've started tinkering with it. So can you tell us a bit more
Yeah.
about what you've done with carob?
Well, yeah, I think you're spot on with talking about how it's presented, and I can attest to this. Like, Carob was like it's the healthy chocolate, like in the 80s or whatever, and people tried to feed it to everybody. And how are you going to compete with chocolate? To be honest, let's be real. Like, chocolate's so delicious, you can't just be like, this is almost as good as chocolate. It's like, well, why wouldn't I just eat chocolate? For most folks, right?
Mm,
I understand there's people that can't eat chocolate, so no disrespect to them, but I think as the larger share goes, presenting it that way did a huge disservice because yeah, I look at it as like it's like an energy bar that grows on trees. You know, you can and they hang on the trees for quite long. You can harvest them over quite a long season if they don't get eaten by, you know, rodents or too soggy first. Um, and yeah, for whatever reason, I know like some carob is quite sweet. It can be up to 50% sugar. But it doesn't seem to spike my blood sugar the way other fruit does. And I don't know why that is. I know there's some tannin content there, and a lot of the tannin has been studied and shown to have medicinal compounds in it. But yeah, that one, I just really enjoy eating it, and it boggles my mind that nobody grows it here because it is a zero input crop for this area. Like literally, there's a hermaphrodite tree a bit south of me, just a landscape planting, but the fruit is good. It's made seed, and you know, there's now some trees growing out from under it, just out on the side of the freeway. You know, so it's super hot, exposed, like compacted soil, polluted. Carob doesn't care. It's there making food anyway. And so I appreciate that about carob quite a bit. And it's got kind of a sad history in California because there's this guy named Coit, and he was collecting all these great carob propagules from all over the world, you know, like Tunisia and Morocco and Spain. And he had this huge orchard in Southern California. And as is common in this tree crops kind of milieu, he died and there was no plan. And so his family sold the land. All this huge collection of carob trees got plowed under. And thankfully, before his death, a lot of the material he'd collected actually got sent to Australia. And there's a guy in Australia that's got a big, probably one of the biggest commercial carob farms in the world. But I think a lot of that material made it out. So now there's another guy in California that's working on bringing it back in. To my shame, I have had zero luck grafting these, and what's tricky with them is the seedlings take forever to get to like a size where you can even graft them. I'm talking like maybe 4 or 5 years. They're just very slow to grow from the bat for me. I've experimented with using some gibberellic acid to kind of expand the or to have them focus rather on stem expansion. So got yeah, looking over the computer screen here. There's some carob there, and they're a year old and maybe like 4 or 5 inches tall now. So maybe that helped a little bit. But I think my focus with those is really getting seedlings out and trying to talk to people about how cool they are, and then trying to again top work those seedlings to known varieties that we can then get the seeds going from there and see what does well, because it's already pretty much perfectly suited to this climate. And so if we can bring in the ones that taste good. It's another one, you know, I don't know that there's been much breeding work with it. I think most of the accessions that you have access to are really just, it was like a wild tree that someone was like, oh, this is good, and just propagated that. But they're mostly grafting onto mature branches, you know, like they'll cut back a 2 inch branch and graft onto that and have good success with that. But I have had poor success grafting onto, you know, pencil thin branches. And when I say poor, I mean zero. So getting more rootstocks is kind of the name of the game for me with that one right now. And I think being able to grow out seedlings, you know, that have grown and fruited successfully well here, maybe we can speed that along and be crossing those with ones that are, you know, known to be tasty. So yeah,
They do
I know
have
there's a lot of
one.
uses.
Oh,
Oh, go
well, I
ahead.
was going to say they do have one saving grace. They're one of the few fruiting trees or tree crops where the seeds preserve pretty much forever dry. Like apple seeds, avocado seeds, citrus seeds, you have to plant them pretty much straight away. Chestnuts as well. But with
Yeah,
carob seeds, they're like little diamonds that you
that's
can
true.
put in a dry
Yeah,
packet, and probably 50 years later, if they were stored properly, you could still get them to grow.
yeah, yeah. Well, you know, that reference to diamonds reminds me of the. the word carat, used to
Oh,
describe
yeah,
diamonds and gold and stuff is derived from the carob seed, which was so universally, sized that people actually use them as like a way to measure the weight of other things.
you are right. You are right. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's a really interesting species that's a long-term investment. It's
Yeah.
difficult for like a single person with a backyard to say, I'm going to put, half of the space I have and the next 50 years dedicated to growing this one tree. Oh, which also
Yeah.
needs another tree to cross-pollinate with so that
By the way, yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, so we might get back to talking about carob and those kind of tree crops when we're talking about networking and like putting things in the wider
Yeah.
community. So we'll
Yeah.
put a pin in that. Um,
Yeah.
so next species I want to talk about with you is chestnuts, but also in particular, there's a local weird chestnut called the
Yeah.
golden chinkapin. And the place I first learnt about this was reading Luther Burbank's work when he was doing
Yeah.
all of this crazy chestnut breeding like 100 years ago. He became obsessed with the golden chinkapin. It's in a different genus, a sister genus, and he was pretty convinced that there would be some way of crossing that with chestnuts. He never got a chance to do it in his lifetime, so I'm really interested to hear what you're doing with the golden chinkapin and if you have any plans along those lines.
Yeah, totally. I think it would be really cool to work that in. In fact, I think that's kind of a broader goal with some of the stuff that I'm working with. If it could be crossed with a local species and hybridized, adding more genetic diversity into the mix, just seems like a winning proposition. So, but yeah, that's a really cool tree. It's really weird, as you say, because it grows up in the Sierra Nevadas, like up to maybe 7,000 feet or something. You'll see it on ridges and stuff, and it's a shrub. It gets maybe like 1 meter tall. It's very close to the ground, and it's beautiful. It's the leaves are golden underneath. They're like green on top and gold underneath, and just a really pretty tree. But here, like down near the coast, it grows in forests with tan oaks, which is another weird species that I also grow out. Really good acorns. Non-quercus oak. It's the lithocarpus. Anyway, they associate in the forest together, and I have a suspicion that the golden chinkapin also associates with a lot of the really good mushrooms that grow on the coast here. We have really high diversity of mushrooms, edible mushrooms, including black trumpets, which are probably my favorite wild mushroom. So I feel like that's kind of a underexplored, underutilized aspect of tree crops that is worth delving into some is kind of like exploring those mycorrhizal connections. And I think here you tend to get it with oak family or Fagaceae family trees that are like evergreen. So we got coast live oak, tan oak, because they're photosynthesizing when there's water in the ground. So um, I think that makes a lot of sense. And so, yeah, if you could get some of those genetics into the chestnut, and get something that also could connect with, these cool local mushrooms, you could have a really, really neat tree. The trick with those ones, I mean, I don't know about the specifics of crossing the pollen. My strategy is like, here's the catkin, like just sprinkle it on there, and I'm going to grow these out anyway. So let's see what happens. So it is a long-term kind of thing, and I don't know how closely related they are. And I also don't know. I'd be curious to know if you found anything more specific about Burbank's work with those and what he had tried, because I have access to a lot of his stuff that's left behind. In fact, I harvest nuts from some of his trees for eating, for growing most years. So, in fact, I have one here that's like 3 years old and starting to make nuts for the first time, which is kind of cool. I know there's ones that he bred that made nuts in like 6 months, but I think there's a balance to be found there where
Yeah, they never
you want
get
a
more
tree
than a
that can
couple of
get
feet
established.
tall because they put all their
Yeah,
energy into their nuts.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So it's that thing where your young trees, you kind of maybe have to pick off fruit the first couple of years so they can
Yeah.
get established. But um,
Yeah, with that
yeah,
wide hybridization, well, first it's worth exploring whether the golden chinkapin on its own has enough genetic diversity that it could be selected and improved and domesticated without a wide hybridization. Are any
yes.
people looking at it in that regard?
Not that I know of. And if anybody listening to this is doing that, hit me up because I know places where they grow in the mountains and on the coast. And I think even just crossing those and seeing what happens be interesting because, yeah, I mean, the nuts, the thing with them is the nuts are tiny. They're edible, but they're, I don't know, just a few millimeters big. And so it's hardly worth the trouble, I think, for a staple crop. But if you could develop some hybrids that produced early or even maybe experiment with grafting them onto chestnut rootstocks and seeing if you could get some genetic changes that way, or at least experiment with different stuff. Like that was one of Burbank's things that stuck with me was his apple breeding. He wasn't waiting around for his apple seedlings to produce fruit. He would just sprout the seedling and then graft it onto a mother tree. And so he'd, know within a year or two what the fruit was like. And it's tough to do that with every species. Like I don't think avocados really respond as well to that kind of, it's more tricky to graft established trees, but
Mm.
um, that's such a cool trick for accelerating your rate of like evaluating your experiments. It's worth checking out.
Well, I do know people routinely hand cross chestnuts because you've got the separate male and female flowers, and the pollen can be frozen and dried for a few
Mm,
months. So
mm.
if you've got timing issues with lining it up with the golden chinkapin, I guess you just need to set up, if you had stored chestnut pollen on hand, then you just need to find a way to stop the golden chinkapins from self-pollinating to somehow block their pollen production. And then you could you know do an artificial cross with chestnut pollen, and anything that does set is probably going to be outcrossed. And then there's
Yeah,
beyond that, there's a whole lot of tricks that you can use for overcoming any incompatibility barriers. If you don't, sometimes it'll just work first time. There won't be any barriers, but other times you've got to try pH or mental pollination, or even like grafting a golden chinkapin onto a chestnut rootstock could
right.
change its compatibility with chestnut pollen. So,
Yeah, that's fascinating.
mm. And I don't know Burbank's history with this in detail, but I think it's something that he became interested in towards the end of his life, and he just didn't have time
Hmm.
to do it. And he was like,
Yeah,
he
yeah,
had he
okay.
had 200 other projects that he was juggling.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, no, he is quite prolific, but the genetic diversity of his chestnut seedling still shines through. Like, there's some that have characteristics of the Seguinii or the Henryi. Like the Seguinii one does this weird fruiting where it kind of just makes a new branch and just keeps making new fruit as it goes out. It's really weird. Yeah. But there's a lot of cool stuff like that. And his experimental farm and what remains of it, sadly, is not too far from here. And you can still pour all the grounds there for chestnut seeds and stuff, which is really cool. So
That
yeah,
is
you got me thinking like, yeah, I could either bring probably the better thing would be to go grab some Chinquapin catkins and bring them back and just hang on to them until the chestnuts here are in flower and see if I can get
And
them to
the
cross.
reverse cross might be easier as well too. If you had chestnuts that
Yeah.
you snipped all of the male flowers off and
Yeah.
somehow like bagged up, and
Yeah.
then use the chinkapin pollen in the reverse. So yeah, often
Yeah.
the cross will work easily one way but not the other. So you always have to
Okay.
check
That's
both.
good to know. Yeah. Yeah, I'll have to
Yeah.
try that.
Yeah, I'm really curious. I mean, the ghost of Burbank could be floating around your neighborhood, kind of
Right. Yeah.
keeping an eye on what you're
Yeah, I know.
doing.
He left so much cool stuff, and I think that's something that gives me hope too. He's like such a big name around here, all the streets and schools, everything. There's a Burbank Center, everything's Burbank. So if you could convince people like these are worthwhile projects to continue, it's another way to get some buy-in from folks. So
Yeah, yeah. We're going to have to talk a bit more about Burbank now that I've realized that connection when we get to the final section talking about networks and legacy and
yeah.
connection, all that kind of stuff. Now, are there any other crops that you're working with that you would like to talk about? Is it all tree crops? Do you do any annual or perennial work?
Yeah, I've got some I'm kind of a lazy like seed saver type up until very recently. I think I hadn't given like putting a lot of intention behind breeding stuff as much thought. But you've kind of helped sparked that for me. So recently I've been planting lots of different corns, just trying to get some of the genetics that do the nitrogen fixation via the aerial roots in a short season. And I love these corn plants, man. They're huge. They grow like, I guess it's like 4 meters tall. Like they're massive, but the problem is they don't it'll be like the end of October and like the corn's still not quite ready to harvest yet. So yeah, trying to get those crossed with some, like there's one that the Dry Farming Institute has been working with. I think it's called Wildfire Corn. So I grew some of that out this year, which they're in a little bit more moist climate than I am, but yeah, if I could grow corn here that didn't have to irrigate in the summer, and give a lot of nitrogen to, it'd be so cool. But I also just love how corn shows up when they cross, and you get these crazy, different shapes and colors on the same cob. It's really fun to play with that way. So
Um,
that's been a recent thing.
I believe the Experimental Farm Network has a nitrogen fixing corn breeding group.
Yes, I saw that recently, and I think I'm subscribed to be notified when they get that back in because I
Yeah,
was like, oh yeah, somebody got this going in Montana. That's probably pretty much what I was trying to do, like get it in a short season. And for me, it's not because the season's not that long. It's just because I want to, get the corn out and put garlic in or whatever at the
yeah.
end of the season. So yeah, and
It,
I've
it
got
goes to show
parsnips.
it's that first unlikely wide cross that is like a pain in the ass to do. But once you've finally done it, that early mixed up material it can be taken in so many different directions. And at this time in history, you can just stick it in an envelope to the other side of the world, assuming the government
Yeah,
doesn't get in the way, and it can be selected to, all these different uses and environments once someone has
yeah,
done that really
totally.
difficult first cross.
Yeah, and I wonder, and in some cases, like I'm thankful for the some of the restrictions. Like we have the one, we don't have chestnut weevils here because you can't ship chestnuts from the East Coast to California, and that's awful. But what's going on over there? It's chicken squawking. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Um, but yeah, sometimes, I think about like, yeah, I wonder if you could just make a doll and just glue some corn seeds onto a, doll shaped thing and ship that out. And if anybody would notice, like just trying to creatively get around some of those things that seem,
Well,
yeah,
it's an interesting thing to reflect on the role of migrants these days in moving plant genetics around. So we have a lot of Chinese people coming to Australia because it's not that far away, and the number of like completely bald little old Chinese ladies that have like a leg of ham in their handbag that they refuse to declare, along with like cuttings and like they don't give a shit. And
yes,
I wonder
yeah,
if there's a similar thing in the US with a lot of the South and Central American migrants going back and forth. They're like, if
yeah,
I'm if
totally.
if my presence here is illegal anyway, I may as well like bring a bundle of cuttings to grow while I'm here.
Right, right. Yeah. Or, just professing ignorance. Like if you're not in the avocado industry, why would you know that you can't bring a seed here? Like I didn't know that until very recently. I'm like, "Oh, I guess that makes sense, even though I feel like I'm in a different state basically from where the avocados are grown commercially. Yeah, I don't know. I agree. But I think that also changes with the administration. You notice right now there's just a lot more fear and it's justified
Mm,
among the communities. And so people are trying to keep a low profile. But yeah, I do think there is something there. And that's probably just a historic fact of human migrations. We just kind of brought plants with us, wherever. Maybe up until the last 10,000 years, that was kind of more the norm of being semi-nomadic and just bringing the plants that, do well with you when you travel.
mm, mm. Yep, absolutely. And now, are there any other plants that you want to talk about before we shift on to low input approaches?
Yeah, maybe I'll just mention I think hazelnuts are kind of cool too, and I thoroughly enjoy eating roasted hazelnuts, and nutritionally, I feel like they're kind of a powerhouse. But it's a weird one in California. I watched there's like a seminar, on growing hazelnuts, and it was put on by Oregon State where they have this hazelnut breeding program, and um, frequently people will say you can't grow them in California, and I've never like found a reason why that would be true. Yeah, and in the seminar, the guy was like, "Yeah, people ask if you can grow them in California," and I just say, "Please don't. Like, you can grow everything else. Let us have our thing, you know. Let us have this one thing that does well here." But I think they're really cool on the home scale, and they're so multi-purpose. You know, the wood is very useful. Like, the British have a super long history of using it to make fences and handles and stuff, all kinds of different things, and um, there is a local native hazelnut as well. And it grows in the shade. It's known to be kind of a shy bearer, but I think that may just be partly due to its habitat. Like, it just doesn't tend to get a lot of sun. It grows in the shade of Douglas firs and redwoods and stuff like that. But I think that's another one that I'd like to try to add
Oh,
the
like yeah,
diversity of the local.
yeah, mix the commercial strains with the local strain and see what happens.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, totally. So I've got, and they do super well from a seed. Like, I can pop a seed in soil that is basically just, the remnant after they scraped the topsoil away when they built this house, 50 years ago or whatever. They'd have no problem with it. It's like heavy clay. They just shoot right down, they'll pop up, and they're 6 feet tall within 2 or 3 years. And yeah, they're flowering. I started to get nuts this year, so um, I think we can put the myth to rest. I know of another grove of hazelnuts that's kind of like uh, just a landscape planting, and they're making great nuts too. So yeah, I don't know. I get where the guy's coming from. We don't need to compete with Oregon on commercial hazelnuts, but I think for backyard use, they seem extremely versatile and extremely yeah, just widely adapted. And there's another cool thing too. I don't know if you read that last book that came out, The Dawn of Everything, David Graeber and David Wengrow, but there's a bit in there where they talked about the people that built Stonehenge, and it seemed like the history indicated that they had shifted to agriculture at one point, maybe 8,000 years ago. And then like a few hundred years later, they're like, fuck this, we're going back to eating hazelnuts. And like they just got like rewilded and went back to, the wild plants. And I think that's really what I'm into, is like just creating environments where it's excellent foraging, and I think
Yeah.
cities could really be like that. It just it takes healing that connection, as we mentioned before.
Well, there's such an interesting spectrum between a completely wild plant that has wants nothing to do with humans and a completely domesticated plant that drops dead if it doesn't get like 10 things every day,
Yeah,
like on a silver
that's
platter. But that's
totally.
not the only two options. There's a whole spectrum of
Exactly. Exactly.
relationships and benefits in between of things that are
Yeah.
not completely wild but not completely domesticated either.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And there's things to tap into, like maybe an avocado tree can't grow totally without some help, but maybe it just gets the rainwater from your roof and a heavy mulch, and that's enough. Or maybe you have the rainwater slowing through a barrel so it just drips over the course of the summer or something like that. Or it's getting the gray water from your kitchen sink, or you just build a sink near your avocado tree or whatever. There's so many different ways you could tap into resources that are already being used to help with those kind of things.
Mm. Well, I mean, that's a good point to shift on and talk about like how do you approach low input or zero input management of the plants that you're growing?
Yeah, I probably have like a very much less productive garden than I would if I was piling on manure and things like that. But I do try to just kind of see what I get away with as far as like how little water can I give these tomatoes and they still produce. So it makes excellent tomatoes. But yeah, like I have friends that, they're just firing the full resource cannon at their gardens and getting great results. So trying to again find a middle ground there. I think really for us the limitation principally is water. We often don't get any rain from April to maybe November, right? So it could be a very prolonged hot dry period, and sometimes the temperatures are getting and I apologize, I'm not great with Celsius, but we'll hit like 115 for a couple days in a row
Mm, mm.
in the summertime, and you know I don't know what that is, maybe like around 50, 55 Celsius, something like that. It's quite hot.
It'd be the low 40s, but that's still, yeah, that's still
There
pretty
you go.
brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's at low 40s. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I went too far there. Uh, yeah. So plants really need something at that time. And I've heard of things surviving periods like that with just a very heavy mulch, but I think a super heavy mulch can be detrimental to you in some ways because you do end up with pests in there. You end up with like slugs and meal bugs that will eat your sprouting seeds. And if you don't get enough rain to penetrate that layer, you have a dry year. It doesn't even get into the soil.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a tricky one. For nutrients, I just into nutrient cycling. I kind of got the Joseph Jenkins humanure compost system going here. I do bring in grain to feed my chickens, but I experiment with stuff for them too, like feeding them acorns and Azolla, which I am kind of an Azolla super fan. I think it's a super powerful couple of plants that grow together. And I don't know how much you know about that one, but it's like a symbiotic relationship between a fern and a cyanobacteria, and it can
Yeah.
photosynthesize this crazy spectrum of light. So it grows really fast, and it's like 25% protein by dry weight. And um, there was the Azolla event, which was like an 800,000 year period where this stuff was growing in the northern Arctic, and it dropped the global temperatures by like 12 degrees C or something like that over that period. It's wild.
We might be
Um,
up for a repeat of that if things go the way people are projecting.
right? Yeah, yeah, I know. We're just gonna need the fresh water, I guess, where we can grow it. Maybe getting a saltwater adapted Azolla should be on our list of things to breed because it's real powerful that way.
That doesn't sound too
Yeah,
impossible. Yeah,
no, yeah,
let's put that idea out into the universe.
yeah.
Uh,
Um, but yeah, so yeah, cycling, stuff from the chickens. I do big compost piles and I do soldier flies and worms as well. And I think I've kind of simplified that where I've got them just in the same bin. And I find the soldier flies kind of take over in the summer because it's hotter and it's more in their favored temperature range. And they're they're like chipper shredders, they kind of destroy everything that I put in the bin, and then the worms will move in after them. And yeah, I'm fascinated with studying the life of the compost. And I learned that there can be like 140 different kinds of fungi present in vermicompost. And yeah, I got one of these used classroom microscopes that you can plug into a screen and look at stuff with. So periodically, take the compost tea and put a few drops in and see what we can find and identify in there. And that's really fun. But yeah, I enjoy making compost teas. I do use like seaweed as an additive for micronutrients and like for the carob, like kelp is a very good source of gibberellic acid as well. So that could be a way to speed your carob growth when you can't buy the concentrated stuff anymore. But we live pretty close to the sea, and we'll go out there and people give me weird looks because I'm grabbing kelp off the beach and throwing it in a bucket. It's all sandy and stuff. But yeah, I find it to be a great resource. And not just
people don't realize how broken the continent scale nutrient cycles have been. Like the amount of seabirds that used to carry minerals from the ocean back inland is nowhere
yeah.
near what it used to be.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and and for us here too, there was the salmon, and
Hmm.
salmon have been getting killed off there, right? We just found out they're all getting killed by the compounds in car tires, which are, they're making whatever a trillion particles of nanoplastics every zero point 0.6 miles that you drive or something, which again, it's like, oh my God. So the problems that things can seem intractable, but I don't know. That's the kind of stuff I would love to see more is like, oh, the salmon are back in the creek and yeah, as a priority for us as a species.
Now, I also wanted to spend some time talking about networks and how you connect with the community around you. Uh, At first, I'm curious to talk more about Burbank. If so,
Yeah.
Luther Burbank was probably like the celebrity weirdo plant breeder in like the late 1800s. And I
Yeah.
think the rest of the world has mostly forgotten that that ever happened, that
Mm,
we've kind of been here before in history, and it seems like we're heading into another era. Hopefully, this time it's more dispersed. It isn't all just put on one person's shoulders.
yes.
Um,
Yeah.
and that makes me want to talk about like legacy. Like he did all this amazing work in his time, but how much of that has persisted and like carried on in various forms, and how much of it has just been lost? Like when the
Mhm.
man himself disappeared off the scene, how much of that, how much of his life's work was lost, and what lessons can that give all of us thinking about our own things that we're working on?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of that speaks to kind of like uh, that process of being an artist and kind of just letting go of your work when it's released in the world. And I don't know. We got his russet potato, right? Like his potato dominates at the grocery store. Like that's the probably crown achievement commercially from things that he made, things
And
that he
that was a
bred.
chance seedling when he was like 16 or something, I believe.
Yeah, wow. I didn't know he was that young.
I
Yeah,
mean,
that's
I know it
crazy.
was very early in it, like before he really went professional. And
Mm.
it was, he was breeding potatoes, but yeah, he wasn't doing it in any way professionally or systematically.
I mean, goes to show what's possible.
Mm, mm,
Yeah. But yeah, I think there's one of his chestnut trees that to me is the clear star of the ones that are left. And so I've crafted some of those. And there's like a historical society, and this gets into the, like connecting with different groups that already exist. I guess I don't have much interest in like forming groups. Like I'm much more interested in kind of like tapping into groups that are already there.
mm.
Sometimes I feel like we got so many groups. Do we really need more organizations? And maybe that's just me being lazy and rather focus on doing stuff I find more exciting. But yeah, there's a group they're the West County Historical Society, and they sell grafted cultivars of stuff from the experimental farm, right? They kind of like manage it. And so I connected with those guys, and like they're interested in selling grafted chestnuts, but chestnuts are kind of a pain to graft, but I think it'd be worth like getting that tree that does so well and makes great nuts early, very productive every year. Like let's get more people growing that, and if you called it the Burbank chestnut, people would probably be like, "Oh, cool, it's the local," and then it sneak into people's hearts that way.
Mm.
Um, and then it would start fruiting, and people would be like, "What am I supposed to do with this?" But then that's the next level, like um, I've got a chestnut peeling machine, so you can just dump in a couple pounds of chestnuts, and it's just like a giant food processing blade. You just run it for like a minute, and they all come out free of skin and pellicle, which makes it super easy to just chuck them into soup, or I'll make like chestnut porridge in the morning, which is really good. But that's another way to connect too, and there's kind of a precedent there with olives. Like there's a lot of olives that grow here. And that's probably like the next most valuable tree crop in this area. But there's community presses, where you can go and you can bring your olives, and people can just all pitch in their stuff together, and you just get a bunch of whatever everyone's bringing in, which is really, I think, too, another cool, fun way to do it. But if that's done commercially, I think if you had like a city or a county-wide program to do that, it would be so much so the better, because it would be more accessible. And yeah, it would just be cheaper. Like right now, even doing that, doing all the work of harvesting, bring it to the community press, still costs like twice as much as just buying a bottle of olive oil at the store. So it's kind of just at like a hobby scale. But I think, there's potential for things like that to be just happening more broadly. There's another group that does this with apples. It's the Slow Food Group. They've got an apple press, and you can just book a time to go there and chuck your apples in there, and you can come out with apple cider. And that stuff's really cool. So maybe we could lean on them to get into chestnuts and olives too, and that could be another way to connect. But I love it. It gets people outside. They're talking about their trees together, and working together, which I think it's kind of like that precursor to depending on each other in a way that we just don't. just aren't familiar with in modern society, like in this society anyway, we're so used to this notion of independence that maybe it's the illusion of independence that's kind of propped up by our access to resources that we don't know that feeling of intimacy that comes from depending on your neighbors. And I'm totally interested in leaning on that and trying to build that up before we need it, I suppose.
And just buying the bottle of olive oil at half price from the big commercial source, it might be cheaper and more convenient, but it's more fragile as well. If that company goes
Yeah.
down, no more olive oil for like a huge number of people, and it just flicks
Yeah.
out all at once.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I think people have forgotten that that's possible, that's possible for things to just go away.
Mm.
And the fragility of it is kind of hidden, and so I was hoping that lesson from 2020 would stick with people. And I don't blame people for wanting to move on. It's comfort is a very uh, appealing notion. It's very comfortable, I suppose, to just be like, oh, good. I don't have to worry about the future. I got my good life. I'm enjoying it. Things are great. Um, I don't know. I just, for whatever reason, my brain's not capable of just relishing that state. I'm always thinking ahead as to what's coming down the pike and trying to anticipate and respond to that.
Now, you've got another really interesting legacy organization in your part of the world, the California Rare Fruit Growers, I think is their name.
That's it. Yeah.
And they've
Yeah.
been
And
around for decades. I think they started in the 70s or even before. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about them? And I'm really curious about how they've managed to last so long. I think they're a really
yeah,
rare
yeah,
example of an organization of this sort who's been around for decades and decades.
totally. I think, I'm not an expert on the history of the organization. So, if any listeners are listening and need to correct me on something, feel free to jump in. But my understanding is they kind of came in and formed at a time where they're recognizing and responding to the lack of diversity and the loss of heirloom cultivars of things that are very mainstream, apples, pears, plums, things like that. Because if you looked at the number of different species that were available, at market, maybe 100 years ago, there could have been 10 to 20 times more species or more cultivars available. And so I think people were trying to grow out orchards and teach about grafting so that people could continue to propagate and keep these varieties that it's all about backyard growers. There are some small commercial orchardists that are into this stuff too, but the focus is really helping preserve genetic diversity and teaching people to enjoy these things, propagate them, and kind of make this a multi-generational project. And I think it's been very successful in that regard. Like the big winter event, they've got, you can buy rootstocks. They sell rootstocks as a fundraiser, as well as some grafted trees. They do grafting clinics, so you can go there and learn different types of grafts. They'll show you how to do a whip and tongue, and they sell, parafilm and buddy tape and grafting knives and stuff like that. Um, so yeah, all that stuff is really cool, and I think
I'm really
there's some
jealous of
potential.
that because learning how to graft is
Ooh,
one of these very touch feel based kind of skills. And you can watch someone do it on YouTube, but getting the camera in the right place and getting an intuition for like the amount of pressure and the speed and yeah, all of those kind of things until you actually get it working in your hands and have a real
yeah,
feel for when it's right. Because, I mean,
yeah,
particularly for deciduous plants where you've only got a window for grafting, you've got like maybe a couple of weeks where you can do it, but then you don't know if it worked for like maybe a month or two. And then you've got to
yeah,
wait a year before you get to try again. So if you need to adjust
totally.
how your fingers moved, on that
Yeah,
loop is really difficult for particularly if
yes,
you're doing it on your own and you don't have someone to tell you. It's like, oh, I think it needs to feel or look a little bit more like this. And
yeah.
yeah, you've got such an amazing opportunity to learn that from experts, from practice
Yeah, no,
people.
I was very lucky and like I don't work in the industry, so this is all kind of just hobby stuff for me. And it's popular enough that a guy that I worked with was like, "Hey, you'd be into this Scion exchange. You should go check this out." It's 20 years ago, whatever. And it kind of blew my mind. I went there with him. I was like, "Oh my God, this is so cool!" Because it's just tables and tables of scions, right? Like they have volunteer events. People go out and cut from various orchards, private orchards. Um, and so you get these tables full of all these different scions. And then he taught me how to graft. I started with apples, and like apples are fairly easy as grafting goes. They're pretty forgiving with timing. So I was hooked from that, and probably got a bit ahead of myself. Tried to graft other stuff like nuts tend to be tougher. They like often need heat at the graft union. So you can either wait until it's like you have to collect the wood in the winter, then wait till they've budded out in the spring to graft, or try to do it in winter, like with a heat pipe. I think I've got a setup. I'm going to try to do that with chestnuts this year and see if I can increase my success rate with those. Maybe I'll stick some carob in there too and see if that works. But yeah, no, I totally hear you. The community aspect of that stuff is huge. It's really important. But I'm excited too, because I think there's in parallel with the shift in climate that we're experiencing, there's a shift in interest of like expanding, just from apples and pears and figs and pomegranates and plums and into things like carob and dragon fruit and mango and avocado and things that weren't traditionally grown here, but that some people are having a little bit of luck with and can share and teach others about. And I think those things are kind of more fun experiments than like it's going to be staple foods, like dragon fruit. It's cool. It's a beautiful cactus, but it's just another sugary fruit. Like nutritionally, I don't think it really stands out.
Yeah, yeah.
But as far as like being a means by which people can connect with each other and with, other living beings, I think it's awesome. So I guess I'm kind of like big tent mindset in that way. Like if you're interested in plants, let's go. Like what
Mm.
what gets you going? Like let's talk about it and let's see how this all works out and we can all share together.
Do you have any intuitions about how the California Rare Fruit Growers has persisted as an organization for so long?
Hmm. There's a lot of folks that have been real heavily involved that are getting pretty up there in age, I'd say like late 80s and stuff. And so I think we may be kind of entering a transitional time. I mean, as with everywhere, there's kind of a generational transition happening. Um, so yeah, I think the challenge for recruiting younger folks is just going to be how do we get people to get into this stuff when they don't have necessarily access to space to work with these things. And so I think maybe tying in with like community garden kind of movements could be real useful. But I think there's other fun ways you could do this stuff too. Like there's a lot of parkland around here. There's like and they get real weird about this area native plants only, but then a block over it's all crepe myrtles and I don't know. But I think I'm a fan of native plants. But I also think like a lot of our native plants just can't feed us the way some of the things that have been real well bred to do that for thousands of years can. So I think there's room for both, especially when you consider that by growing food where you live, you're displacing food that's probably grown in a much more destructive way to the environment, where the native plants in that area used to be. Um,
That is one
so
huge
yeah,
advantage working with tree crops that are locally adapted for pretty much zero input growing, that if you have
yes,
that public space, you can just plant them and come back in a few years to graft them, and then come back once a year to harvest and top work them after
exactly.
that.
Yeah, and that's what I was gonna say. We do have cool like native nut crops too. Like we got black walnuts and we got man, like black oak acorns are so good. They're so good. It's like such a great food. And yeah, like just like let's lean into that and let's, plant those out if that's what we want to do and just go native only. And we can still teach people how to use these things and get together to find ways to leach them faster or crack and separate black walnuts better. There's so much potential there, but I think most people haven't tasted this stuff. And for me, the first time I had a black walnut, I was like, holy cow, this is like a real walnut. Doesn't really taste good. It's like so flavorful. Um,
Do
so
you
yeah,
think the rare
I
fruit growers would ever pivot in more of that direction as the generation changes to get young people involved? It's like you can, here's the material. We need people to go and plant it. We need people to learn how to graft it. And
yeah. I mean, that's probably a place I can, that's something I should be working towards. As I hear you say that, I'm like, yeah, I definitely think there's potential there, and I think getting kids excited about this stuff too is a really big window of opportunity because it may not always be the current land ownership model that we're dealing with. Like we may be squatting, we may be just like subsistence living in the ruins of what used to be this city or whatever, and the more things we can get out there in the meantime, so much so the better. So yeah, I think kind of thinking beyond the current frameworks is important there. And you had mentioned you sorry, dude, I feel like I'm just rambling on
no,
everything that you
that's all
said, just
good.
just going. Um, but yeah, like you had mentioned earlier about legacy, and to me, I think that's the most important thing you could do is it's not about getting your name out there as much as just get stuff out there that works. And if you can get stuff out there that propagates itself and will be there growing for the next few generations and providing more food than would have been there before, it's a huge service to the world.
Mm.
So I think that's really my angle on it, just trying to get stuff out there and get it planted. And so yeah, there have been like some local farmers have been interested like in the chestnuts and the carob stuff too. We've got issues with gophers here, so getting trees established can be tricky. I think I'm probably understating the case when I say there's issues with gophers. They're insane, like they eat everything. So I'd
Uh,
seen someone say, this might have been somebody, was this somebody on your podcast? It was something that just in the last couple months, but somebody mentioned that um, growing castor bean, and like gophers won't go anywhere near the roots of that. So that got me
ah.
wondering if you could, just kind of use that as a nurse crop to get trees established, like plant a bunch of castor bean and just kind of interplant stuff that you want, your chestnuts or your black oaks or your carob trees and see if they can get established before the gophers mess them up. Yeah,
That
I don't
definitely
know.
sounds like something you need to experiment with. It's
Yeah,
little tricks
yeah, for
like that
sure.
that seem like nothing, but then once you have them working and spread that information, it can just completely transform a culture.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
do some experiments. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to talk about. No, I think we've covered everything. Did I miss anything that you wanted to dig into?
No, time's gone by fast. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this stuff with somebody that wants to hear it. So it's a refreshing change from just trying to drop little seeds for people. But yeah,
Well,
no,
I've
it's great talking about this stuff, and I really appreciate the work you do with your podcast. And I think it does it has helped me kind of focus in on like what I want to do with my brief time here on this little blue dot, like what's really worth doing. So yeah, thank you for that.
And if people want to follow up, maybe they're in your local area and they want to, get in touch or learn more about what you're doing, is there any convenient place people can do it? Not everyone has like a website or a catalog or a book or anything.
I'm one of those. Yeah. I do have an email. Maybe I can give it to you to put in the show notes. I would love to hear from folks that are local and are into any of this stuff. Yeah, let's team up.
Yeah, let's do it that way.
With
Okay.
you and yeah, let's get together.
Okay. Well, thank you, Nick, for an amazing conversation about a whole bunch of plants that I so rarely get a chance to talk about in any detail.
Cool, cool. I appreciate the opportunity, Shane. It's a pleasure chatting with you, and yeah, I look forward to hearing more from you and your guests in the future. So yeah, I really appreciate everything that you do, and thoroughly enjoyed your book as well. So put that plug out there. I thought that was really cool, and your ideas about what's possible for breeding things in the future is really really eye-opening. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. If you'd like to support the show and all the work that I do, you can buy a copy of my book, Taming the Apocalypse, that explores the potential future of post industrial biological technology. The audiobook can also be bought on Kobo, or you can unlock it by getting a paid subscription to the Substack and going back through the archive of past posts. It's buried in there somewhere, along with a lot of other articles. Otherwise, you can get a free subscription to the Substack and read each article as it comes out every week. Up next? Well, there is no up next. Not exactly. I'm going to be recording my next big batch of episodes over the next couple of months, and hopefully by the time this episode comes out, I will have some ready to go. So you'll just have to guess. But I've got a very interesting long list of people who I would like to talk to, and I'm very keen to keep this show rolling for as long as possible. So thank you for listening up to this point, and hold tight, and episodes will be coming out soon.